Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for Wednesday, March 28th, 2018, the 9th year of Chungi, the second month and the 12th day of that month by the heavenly calendar. I'm Tim Elder, and with Greg Knoll sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
Yes. Let's go first to the weather. It's 36 degrees and cloudy at the Cheongguk Palace this morning. You said it felt very warm here at the church.
Yeah, I would think it's in its 40s. I don't know what it actually is. What's the weather say?
Well, the weather says that here in Newfoundland it's 32 degrees.
32,
but
okay.
what does the weather know?
It
feels warm.
Running warm today.
Yes, it feels like a spring is in the air.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of, here at the church, there's a little bit of rain falling, and the rain is causing the snow on the roof to fall down. And during the Korean service, I heard a big bang over there, and where there's no one there. And I'm thinking, whoa, are we being invaded? No, it was just the snow falling off the roof.
Iron,
I've got rod of iron. Yes. But yeah, once in a while, now I've heard 4 or 5 times the snow falling off and making a big crashing sound as it falls onto the ground, coming off the roof. And so, yes, we are in that time of year when the snow is melting away, and soon maybe leaves will be on the trees. But that takes time.
Yeah.
Yes. I was taught last year that it's actually the ground temperature that determines when the leaves come out. Someone was explaining to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what was it? The first spring I was here got to be, I think, the end of April. And there were still no leaves on the trees. Now I'm wondering what's happening. Did all the trees die?
It was a cold winter.
Yes. It was long, but also, I guess the ground temperature wasn't. But then in the first week of May, boom, everything just sort of exploded.
Yeah.
It was quite amazing.
Well, March is in like a lion, out like a lamb, right? So it's kind of happening.
Yes, it's kind of...
Most of March was the lion.
Most of March was the lion, yes. The last few days we have the lamb.
Yeah.
So anyway, as over the next few days, we're going to have highs, daytime highs in the 50s.
Great.
55 today, 53 tomorrow, 59, 58, and 50 on Sunday. So yes, it does appear that as April comes, spring is here finally. Even the king was saying that he's glad to see spring. That's really saying something. That is really saying something. All right, let's go ahead and begin with our Rimas. Somehow doing the news first and then the Rimas, when we only have an hour and a half, actually last one time I think I missed doing the Rima altogether. Excuse me. I want to read from Mark this morning, chapter 10, about divorce. And chapter 10, beginning with verse 2, and I'm going to go to verse 9, I think. Yes, verse 9. And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife?" Tempting him. In other words, they were tempting Jesus. And he answered and said unto them, "What did Moses command you?" And they said, "Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away." And Jesus answered and said unto them, "For the hardness of your heart he wrote you this precept. But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and cleave to his wife. And they twain shall be one flesh. So then they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder."
Pretty clear.
Pretty clear. Don't divorce. Man cleaves to his wife. It's cleaving. Now, of course, Father taught very strongly against divorce, although there were 3 instances in which he, I wouldn't say permitted, but recognized divorce. There are 3 situations. One, of course, is when there's adultery, where the remaining spouse can, and it's not encouraged at that time, not encouraged a divorce, but given the option then to forgive the offending spouse and to set some conditions and make a new beginning together, or to divorce. The second case is when one spouse leaves the faith or goes a different way, and even then, it's not encouraged. It's not at all, and if at all possible, father wanted the couples to remain together. But if the remaining spouse felt that it was necessary, then that spouse could opt for divorce. The third case being where there could not be, no children could be born. But even then, father encouraged adoption from another blessed couple, and not divorce. But it was also an option that was available to divorce, so that there could be a direct blood lineage. And interesting thing is that father considers adoption one way in which the lineage is continued. Mm-hmm. And he encouraged the wives of the 5 great saints to adopt. And he said, and he explained this as being a way in which the lineage of that saint could be established on the earth today. That's very interesting. But father is considered adoption to be a means of continuing the lineage. Mm. Yes. But the father strongly, as Jesus did, strongly preached against divorce.
Yeah, I think it's it's something that a person obviously needs to pray to God, and nobody can really counsel somebody in such a delicate manner. And I think it requires obviously not a rash decision, but something that requires a lot of prayer and a lot of contemplation. All three of those, there's room for like in adultery, for forgiveness. That is a possible road for somebody leaving the faith, working with that person over the long run, so that they could possibly come back to the faith. And certainly adoption is a very legitimate path. So it's not clear cut, is it? It's something that needs a lot of prayer and a lot of guidance. So
yes. Let's go to the Chonsongyong Rima. I'm in the book on the Pacific Rim Providence, and this is the chapter that first chapter, 21st century, is the era of the oceanic era, and this is on page 1874 on this electronic version of the Chonsongyong. And Father talks about Jeju-do. Jeju-do is an island off the coast, southern coast of Korea. If you look on the map, it's situated kind of in the border between the Yellow Sea, I would say, between the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea. And it's had some very strategic importance over the years. And Father often went to Jeju-do. Sometimes he went, during his younger years, he would go there hunting often. And in the latter years, there was some land there, an orange orchard, I remember, and a workshop center, and some marine product companies were also based there. Some fisheries where fish were being raised in tanks and so forth. So Father had a lot of interest in Jeju-do. Jeju-do is the name of the island. Jeju-do is a small fragment of land that fell away. So it's as if, you have the peninsula, and then this piece of land just sort of somehow fell away, so it got separated. Young seagulls come and excrete there. All right, I'll just say one word, and then I'll go beyond it, all right? Father's not the kind of person who uses a word like excrete. Father was a very down-to-earth person, all right? Father did not. If Father were to speak English, he would not use the word excrete. Moving on. They came to excrete and breed, since it is an easy commute. Seagulls have their babies on islands, don't they? Islands are where all the sea animals have their children. Animals with 4 legs must go to the land to breed. Don't turtles do that? That is how it is for everything that lives in the ocean, aside from fish. Fish do not have sexual organs as we know them. Some fish have a kind of spot. They all have a line, and the male and female rub this part together to have a relationship. But the sea mammals come to the land to have their babies. That is why Chejido is important. Do you remember last year when the koi in the king's pond, the Cheonryung pond, were mating? Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah.
That was quite a...
Yeah.
They really created a lot of bubbles. They were just doing like this, and then all the bubbles were coming up, and then a little while later we saw all these eggs along the side of the pool, and pretty soon a little baby koi came out. And of course, with the koi, they often eat their babies. That's the problem. But I was remembering that. But anyway, yes, Father's, what is he saying here? Some fish have a kind of spot. They all have a line. The male and female rub this part together to have a relationship, but the sea mammals come to the land to have their babies. This is why Chejido is important. So anyway, he's talking about the importance of Jeju Island. It has a very great military importance, of course. Recently, in the last few years, South Korea built a naval base there. And I can see how Xi Jinping and the Chinese Navy would very much like to be able to turn that into a Chinese naval base, because it would really block the U.S. Naval base in Sasebo, Japan, in Kyushu, Japan. You can see on the map that anything coming out of Sasebo base would be essentially blocked by that base on Jeju Island. So it has very important military significance.
Father just has this remarkable observation of nature, doesn't he? Throughout his life, he such an ardent love for nature and how we can discover God's nature through the natural world. And I think that's one of the things that struck, because I grew up in upstate New York as a real nature lover. I was an avid bird watcher. I would explore for hours and hours and examining nature. And so when I would hear Father speak, it really struck me. This man really loves nature, and I think that's one of the hooks that Father got on me. And I think the Bible talks about it too. You come to know the nature of God through the natural world. And Father, I think, said at one point that nature is the best teacher, one of the best teachers about God's heart, God's love. So I think this is a good expression of that. That how babies, where babies are made in sea creatures and islands, and talking about seagulls. I love it when Father talks about the natural world like that. To me, it really shows Father's innocent heart and pure heart. And he would spend hours and hours talking about springtime and winter, the seasons, and how we can come to really, I think, people who really love nature, really love God, can come to appreciate God. So even if people say they don't, like I have, I won't say, but people who love nature will eventually love God, I think.
Okay.
even if they say they're atheist or whatever, if they really love nature, have an appreciation for nature, then I think that's a beautiful thing. And I, as a parent, I my wife and I really try to instill that into our kids, to even from infancy on, be out in nature, and they to this day they all love nature, which that's not many things I'm kind of proud of as a parent, but that's one thing I am, that they all love nature.
Okay, Greg, thank you very much. Wonderful. All right, let's. Why don't we go just straight into the news instead of taking a break? We don't have much time today. The big news today kind of is that Kim Jong-un's trip to North Korea was confirmed.
There's a picture.
There's lots of pictures, actually. The Daily Mail has produced, has given us lots of pictures, and not only that, but China actually sent a message to the White House saying that, yeah, we met with Kim Jong-un and sent a personal message to President Trump. And they also notified the South Korean presidential palace, presidential office prior to the official announcement. And so China is making a big thing of this. So what is all? So there's a lot of speculation of what this all means. This is the first time that Kim Jong-un has traveled outside of his country since he came to power in 2011, and during his visit, he said, "Of course, yeah, I had to come to China before going to any other country." Yeah, because in the old days, when a new king would be installed in Korea, the king would have to receive the official recognition from the emperor in China before he was actually king. He would.
So there's a history there.
Yeah, there's a history. Yeah. So you can see it as an extension, sort of an extension of that. And over the past 7 years, Kim Jong-un has wanted to go to China, but apparently China had put a condition on it, saying, "Well, you can't come until you show that you're moving towards a denuclearization." This was kind of a condition that they put on. So now,
is that sincere?
Well, I'll get to that. So now, China has allowed this to take place. Not only allowed it, but they made it. They didn't announce it until the train left Beijing and crossed back over into North Korea. They didn't announce it until then. But once Kim Jong-un is safely back in North Korea, now they're making a big deal of it. So actually, there was an editorial in the South Korean newspaper Chosunilbo that we read early this morning in the Korean portion of today's broadcast that said that this may all be part of a strategy for China to create an excuse for it to lessen the pressure on North Korea, to lighten up on North Korea, saying, "Oh, now okay." Kim Jong-un came here and he promised us that he's going to denuclearize. So we don't have to, the UN doesn't have to be so hard on North Korea anymore. U.S. doesn't have to be so hard on North Korea anymore. So don't complain if we violate the UN sanctions, basically. So, after all, the kid has repented, so let's embrace him with love, that maybe this is what is happening, and that may be true because, I say again what I've always said, that North Korea will not denuclearize.
Right.
That is
under any circumstances,
and unless they, this current regime anyway. If this current regime falls and it disappears, and a new regime comes with a new ideology, then there may be a denuclearization. But this regime will not it's in their constitution,
Yeah.
In the preamble to their constitution, they inserted a phrase that says, "We've got nuclear weapons." 핵보유국 means a country, a nuclear possessing country. So unless they're going to amend their constitution again, they're not going to get rid of it.
Crown jewel. They're very proud of that accomplishment.
They're proud of it, and they consider it to be the ultimate security for their regime. Although they're mistaken, it's actually going to be the opposite. It's going to be the thing that's going to cause their downfall. But they believe that it is their ultimate form of security. So they're not going to denuclearize. So the proposal to meet President Trump was intended as a way of finding a way to keep their nuclear weapons. Visit to Beijing is probably intended to find a way to keep their nuclear weapons and to have a way or give China an excuse to lighten up on the sanctions against North Korea. And maybe that's why China is making such a big thing of this now. Hey, we've got victory. We got victory. Let's pop the champagne. This kind of a thing. But obviously, if he's going to meet Trump, if he's going to go across the military demarcation line and go to the southern side of the peninsula to meet President Moon Jae-in, he had to go to China first. It would have been a tremendous breach of protocol, a tremendous affront to China if he had done those things, if he had had those meetings without first going to China, because China is his sponsor and his boss, his political boss. So of course he had to go in and check in, with Xi Jinping first before doing these things. So does that mean that these meetings are actually going to take place now, the North-South meeting? North-South meeting, probably yes, because after all, Moon Jae-in is basically his errand boy, so no problem there. But meeting with Trump, I don't know. The Daily Mail quoted him as giving a very long if. Let's see if I can bring this up quickly. Saying that, if there's also all this kind of conditions, about the if clause there is about three lines long. So, if China, if the United States and South Korea create all sorts of goodwill and do all sorts of good things, then these meetings can take place. So they're giving themselves plenty of wiggle room to cancel those meetings if it doesn't really work out for them. Here's the if clause here. Let's see here. See if I can find it. Not the summary, but the actual thing. Here we go. If South Korea and the United States respond with goodwill to our efforts and create an atmosphere of peace and stability and take phased, synchronized measures to achieve peace, then the issue of denuclearization on the peninsula can reach resolution. So the if clause here is 2.5 lines long.
Yeah, it's such BS, isn't it?
So, but God is working here. I think God is doing something. We haven't quite figured out what it is, but
it seems like some posturing going on too, with the tensions rising in the South China Sea, to show the United States that North Korea and China are united and will be a combined military force if the United States, continues its aggression.
Yes, but no mention of lips and teeth this time. That was the thing that I noticed. Xi Jinping or either side did not mention, the relationship between China and North Korea is like lips and teeth. This is what Mao Zedong said. And this has been the traditional phrase for China to describe the relationship between China and North Korea. But I think maybe the teeth have bitten the lip a few times too many. I think maybe China decided maybe that's not such a good idea after all to describe it that way.
Well, that certainly lifts up North Korea's stature in world politics. Meeting with President of China.
Yeah,
Emperor of China. Sorry,
Emperor of China. Yes, yes. Xi Jinping has said that he's now basically said he's going to remain in his position for life. For life.
We'll probably see, some children of his taking the next. We might see that in terms of a dynasty being created. What do you think?
China has always criticized the dynastic rule in North Korea.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, and dynastic rule is really, if you think about it, is fundamentally contradictory to Marxism because, after all, they're about destroying families. So dynasties are not their thing. But I don't know. But that's one thing that Xi Jinping has to do over the next however long he plans on living, is to raise up a successor,
right,
who will also not be a threat while he is alive, and that's the tricky part. That's the tricky part.
You got to find somebody young enough who can be patient.
Yeah, but young kids are not very patient. Yes, yeah. Before I go any further, let's see. Have you seen the movie Paul, Apostle of Christ?
No.
Yeah, because last Saturday we talked about that, and I talked about that, and I said that I might go see it with my wife, and we did.
You did? Okay.
Saturday night. Yes. So I'd like to talk a bit about that.
Yes. Please.
Yes.
I'd be interested.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody else would be interested.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Well. First of all, let me try to say some good things about it first.
Oh, boy.
Then I'll tell you how I really felt about it.
Rotten Tomatoes.
we ought to encourage these types of movies, Bible-based movies that are made by people of faith. And so I think it's a good idea for people to go see it. For that reason alone, anyway, buy the ticket anyway. Even if you don't go see it, buy the ticket. There were about 20 people, I think, in the theater when my wife went there at Dixon City. There were about 20 people in the theater, so it wasn't really on a Saturday night. So it wasn't really sort of a huge box office thing, but there were some people there. And I felt it was the movie was useful to remind us that. Basically, the Christians in the Roman Empire were the victim of a false flag operation, where the Emperor Nero set fire to the city and then blamed it on the Christians, and so that was kind of a reminder of what can happen when people of faith are living in a tyrannical environment or in a hostile environment, and it was a reminder too of how Christians were treated as a dangerous cult in Rome. The movie depicted at least how Christians could not walk freely in the streets of Rome because soldiers were constantly checking people's papers, and they didn't explain why, but just showed that the Christians did not have these papers that they needed to show to the Roman soldiers when they were asked to produce them. So there was this colony of Christians living sort of behind these walls, living in fear. But that's where I started to have problems with it, because it was very clearly a promotion of what the Second King refers to as beta Christianity. That see, Paul is in prison during this time. Paul is in prison throughout the movie, from beginning to end. Although there are some flashbacks to his younger years, including the stoning of Stephen. But as long as it is in the present on the timeline of the movie, he is in prison. And of course, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it's stop me if I'm giving too many spoilers. Okay. But it is a promotion of beta Christianity, where even in the trailer that we watched on Saturday, there's a quote from Paul that, love is the only way, he says there. And there's no discussion of how Jesus told his disciples to pick up swords or to buy swords. And am I going to give away too much if I continue here?
I think you're fine.
Okay, because in the movie,
movies, it's moving on very quickly anyway. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in the theaters that long. Okay,
so there is a scene where, so Paul is in prison and being, not so much being mistreated so much, because the head of the prison is kind of sympathetic towards him. But this is also kind of a distortion, I think, because the movie tries to say that, okay, Nero was crazy, but everybody else in Rome kind of knew what was going on, and everybody else, they had their gods, and they were very sympathetic towards the Christians. So they kind of say, okay, Christianity was treated like a cult, but only by the really crazy, only because Nero himself was crazy. Everybody else in Rome kind of knew that these people were harmless. That's the kind of image that the movie tries to portray. But in the movie, there's a scene where Paul is in prison, and a group of young people in that Christian colony pick up some swords, get some swords, and then they raid the prison. They kill a couple of guards. And they go and they get to Paul's cell, and they say, "Okay, we're here to save you." And Paul then starts quoting Romans 13. I mean, literally, he starts quoting. I don't know why he started reading something that he had written previously, but anyway, he starts quoting Romans 13 about how, you have to follow the authorities because God has given them authority, and without God they would have no authority, this kind of thing. So basically telling them to go back. Stand down, yeah, so go back. That kind of thing. So there's no discussion of how Jesus told his disciples to have swords. throughout there's a scene where at one point then towards the end of the movie a lot of the people in that Christian colony are captured and taken to the Colosseum and basically fed to the lions, and some of them are young children, and then Luke, who is he's kind of Luke is the co-star of the movie, and Luke is in prison with them. Although Luke gets out before he doesn't get fed to the lions. He gets out. That's another thing. But Luke is telling them, "Oh, don't worry. It'll hurt, but only for a short while."
What, being fed to the lions?
Being fed to the lions. Yeah. And then you'll be in a wonderful place with Jesus. So don't worry. And so they all go, marching out into the arena. We don't actually see the lions, but we know what's going to happen to them.
And I think this was auditoriums filled with people, so there couldn't have been a lot of support for the Christians.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
It's like going to a professional wrestling match.
Yes. That's about it. Yes.
General support for the feeding of the lions.
Christians to the lions. Yes.
Christians to the lions.
Yes. So there is a contradiction in the movie in that sense. Yes. Yeah. And actually, the head of the prison says, "Oh, gee, I'm sorry about what happened to your people today." It's like like they'd stubbed their toe or something. And Paul and Luke are kind of like, "Oh yeah, okay, well, c'est la vie." But in the end, Paul gets his head chopped off in the end of the movie, so he dies. And Luke actually in the movie admits that he lies in the Gospel of Luke. In the Gospel of Luke, it says at the end of the Gospel, it says how. Let me see. Anyway, at the end of the Gospel of Luke, it says Paul lived in a villa for 2 years and he taught. And Luke said, "Yeah, when I write about this, I'm going to lie because I want to make you look good." That's exactly what he says.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I didn't really, although I encourage people to buy the tickets and let's support these kinds of movies and stuff like that, but I wasn't really too impressed with the storyline. And I didn't like the way that they kept trying to use the Bible, basically copy the Bible into the script. Like Romans 13, there's another place, 1 Corinthians 12.
These are all the soft passages.
Yeah, all the soft passages. Yeah. So anyway, that was my.
Yeah, I think a movie needs to be made where Jesus is an alpha male.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really true that almost all Christian movies are beta in nature. It's not a good message.
No.
It's not a balanced message.
There's nothing there about, let's learn some self-defense. Nothing about that. They were just in that colony behind this wall, and they're discussing whether to leave Rome or not. And finally, they do leave Rome. By the way, they say they're going to a place where they can be better protected. Well, they don't want to protect themselves, but they want other people to protect them. Anyway, let's. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
All right. Shall we take a break? Let's do that. Yeah, it's been a while. Let's take a break, and we'll come back with more news from a tuning perspective.
Folks, and look at what I've got here today. My God, take a look at this. This is a BFR in 454 Casul with an octagonal barrel, magna porting, micarta grips. And look at that, it even has my initials on it, JM. Look at that thing of beauty, my God. Pop open the cartridge insertion door, and look at that cylinder spin. The finest revolvers in the world. That's a cannon. That's a cannon. Oh, man. Pretty accurate, though. Target. Oh boy! Massive repo.
Welcome back to the King's Report for March 28th, 2018. Tim Elder and Greg Knoll here for the second King of Hyung Moon. Let's just run through the Drudge headlines here very quickly. ABC rolls out pro-Trump Roseanne sitcom, I guess, pro-Trump. And we'll see how that goes. Whistleblower says, Facebook can hear you. Well, listen carefully, Facebook. Trump privately suggests the military could pay for wall. And we did the Kim story. NBC says 800,000 attended D.C. anti-gun march, but CBS says 200,000. I guess it is whatever you say it is. Yeah. This thing of estimating crowds.
Yeah,
the National Park Service actually no longer estimates crowds that gather on the monument or on the mall. So it is, whatever you want it is. If you say it was 10,000, yeah, 10,000. A million. YouTube puts warning on satirical hog video. Of course, they don't want their saint there to be sullied.
I watched that. It's interesting. There's another article. I don't know if we'll get to it today or not, but where AI is becoming more and more a part of these video clips. Where you can, like, they put David Hogg as a Hitler youth leader, and he's up in front of a big German crowd, and he's yelling out these slogans, and it looks like he's actually saying it, but of course it's AI doing it, and there are some people that are very concerned about this, that more and more videos are going to start appearing with AI technology.
Yes. There's been some warning about that. Yes. Yeah. It used to be that the camera wouldn't lie, but now it does.
Now it does.
Let's see, elsewhere on Drudge, Baltimore confirms their 911 dispatch system was hacked. Oscar president cleared of sexual harassment complaint. Female lawmaker denies groping. Robert Mercer, secret adventure as New Mexico cop. State scramble to avert Obamacare sticker shock. Terrifying Xanax resurgence in America. Revolt against California sanctuary. Orange County Sheriff defies post inmate release dates, saying, hey, we're not going to cooperate with the federal government, but this is when this guy is being released, just so everybody knows. We're not cooperating with the federal government, but so they're basically indirectly doing that. Violent deportee escaped ICE custody at JFK Airport. So I want to get, there's some things that I want to get to very quickly here. Elementary teacher charged in gang-related slayings. Wow. What kind of elementary school is that? 6 countries planning state boycotts of World Cup in Russia. Zuckerberg 2009, Facebook will never sell your info. Of course, yeah, we didn't believe it back then. Fraudulent web traffic continues to plague advertisers. Trump targets Amazon, about time. Army captain who used to be a man marries an actor who used to be a woman. All right?
That's pretty messed up.
Okay. China's space station to unleash series of fireballs before crashing into the Earth. We don't know when or where it's going to actually come down. In Venezuela, hungry child gangs use machetes to fight for quality garbage. A measles outbreak threatening Colombia and Brazil. Phoenix TV station offers live feed of cat stuck on the pole. Dodger Stadium flooded with sewage after pipe bursts during the game. Well, that's not very good.
That would be good for grass growth later on in the season.
Yes. There was a piece of news that I wanted very much to cover today, and that is here something happened on Monday that needs to be noted. That is that China opened its oil futures market.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that. And here's a Reuters story on that. Let's first read this. I'll read this. China's launch on Monday of its crude futures exchange will improve the clout of the yuan in financial markets and could threaten the international primacy of the dollar, argues a new report by Hayden Briscoe, APAC head of fixed income at UBS Asset Management. Not only this report, but a lot of people are saying this. This is the single biggest change in capital markets maybe of all time, Briscoe said in a follow-up telephone interview. You know, and it's not something that has produced something over just, I mean, like today, the sun is still rising in the east, right? So it hasn't really brought about a cataclysmic falling of the sky, but over time, this is going to,
It's a huge thing. Yeah.
could be a very, very huge thing. The launch of the oil futures yuan-denominated in Chinese renminbi currency, also known as the yuan, is China's first commodity derivative open to foreign investors. This marked the culmination of a decade-long push by the Shanghai Futures Exchange to give the world's largest energy consumer more power in pricing crude sold to Asia. So just to help people understand, you know, in the early 1970s, President Nixon closed the gold window for the U.S. dollar. Until then, you could take $35 to the Federal Reserve and they would give you an ounce of gold. But then in the early 70s, for various reasons, President Nixon said, okay, we're no longer going to do that. So then in the next 7 or 8, 9 years, the price of gold rose from $35 an ounce to about $900 an ounce over that time. Today it's worth $1,350 an ounce approximately today. Another thing that changed was that the dollar had to have something that was backing it up. So Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and made this deal with the Saudi Arabians first and then later with all of OPEC that said that all of oil will be sold in dollars, that oil-producing countries will only accept dollars for oil. And this was the petrodollar, and this has been the sort of the way that dollars have been, the value of the dollar has been backed up over the past, what is it now, close to 5 decades. So if a country wanted to buy oil, and a lot of countries want to buy oil, they had to have dollars. And so they would get dollars from the United States, and this is why the United States could print lots and lots of dollars, but not have inflation because those dollars were outside the country, outside the United States. Other countries were using those dollars to buy their oil, and then Saudi Arabia used a lot of those dollars. Once they got those dollars, they would use those dollars to buy military equipment from the United States, or to invest in the U.S. debt. So everything was going well, and sometimes people would get out of line, like Saddam Hussein got out of line, started saying, "Oh, I'm going to start accepting euros." Muammar Gaddafi got out of line. So, I'm not going to accept dollars. I'm going to start accepting euros. Well, guess what happened to them? Gone. So people who challenged the petrodollar did not have good futures, did not have an easy time of it. They got killed, and their countries got invaded. But now China comes along, and China's in a different position from Iraq and Libya, because China now, last year, became the largest importer of oil. Until then, it was the United States, but China surpassed the United States last year, became the largest importer of oil. So if you're the biggest consumer, you've got some leverage, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that true? As a businessman, your largest consumer has a lot of power over you, doesn't they? So China says, okay, we've got this power now. So now we're going to say, okay, we're going to use our own currency to buy oil. If you want to sell us oil, you got to accept our currency. But what am I going to do with yuan? If I sell oil to China and they give me their own currency, yuan, what am I going to do with it? I can't take it to a U.S. bank and deposit it. They won't accept it. So China says, okay, we got a solution to your problem. We'll sell you gold. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have gold than dollars anyway, right? So that's
they've been buying up gold for the last 20 years.
They've been buying up gold for the last 20 years, yes. Like this article said, decades long preparation has been going into this. Yes.
Plus,
because
they can also sell them military equipment now,
yes,
just like the United States did for years.
So China's been preparing this, and this is part of Xi Jinping's dream, which he announced officially at the Party Congress last October, that China intends to become the preeminent superpower in the world. And so now they are challenging the petrodollar, which is a big part of the reason the United States is the preeminent superpower in today's world. Because the United States, for example, can impose economic sanctions on North Korea or Russia or someplace else because of the power of the dollar. But this, plus cryptocurrency, this will also help countries get around that. And it also means that the dollars now, the demand for dollars, if this grows, I mean, they started with 40,000 contracts on Monday, which is not a huge volume, it's a small volume, but if it grows, and we can imagine that it will, then it's going to reduce the demand for dollars in the world. What's going to happen to those dollars? They come back to the United States,
where we already have a huge deficit.
And then also a lot more dollars in the United States chasing the same amount of goods is going to cause huge inflation.
Inflation, yeah.
So that's why this is a big thing. But it's starting small, all right. So that's probably why most media are not really picking it up right now. But over time, though, this is a game-changing thing.
Yeah. This,
potentially, and also very probably it's going to be a game-changing thing. So that's why I wanted to go through this. Let's go through the rest of the article here. Already on Monday, UNIPEC, the trading arm of Asia's largest refiner, Sinopec, has inked a deal with a Western oil major to buy Middle East crude priced against the newly launched Shanghai crude futures contract. In other words, in Chinese money. This helps cement the exchange's viability and challenges the petrodollar system in which oil deals are executed in dollars. This would decrease demand for the greenback and boost U.S. inflation. China surpassed the United States in 2017 to become the world's largest oil importer. Nevertheless, the existing price benchmarks, Brent and WTI crude, are both in dollars, and importers across the world must buy dollars in order to conduct oil deals. But the move to trade oil in yuan will diminish the role of the greenback in global financial markets, argues Briscoe. Pricing oil in renminbi or yuan and launching a trading hub will raise China's prominence and integrate it further in global markets. And demand for yuan from foreign investors eager to participate in the Shanghai International Energy Exchange will boost the currency's value and divert trading away from the dollar. Appetite for dollars would shrink, driving the price of the currency down. The renminbi's prominence will only grow with China's consumption. Demand will increase 30.6% to 753 million tons per year in 2040, according to BP. This power will let China bypass the petrodollar system and demand that its oil purchases be priced in yuan, as seen in Monday morning's UNIPEC deal. This may be even more likely in deals in which China has outsized leverage, such as their offer to buy 5% of Saudi Aramco. As it stands, oil exporters store the revenue from their U.S. oil sales in treasury bonds, a process known as petrodollar recycling. As a result, the rise of the petro-yuan would also jeopardize a key source of financing for U.S. deficit spending.
That's a big one right there.
That's a big one, isn't it? Yeah. The U.S. Has to borrow money. The U.S. government has to borrow money, right? I mean, this unless you're going to raise taxes.
It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. So this is just one more reason why the sky is going to fall on the U.S. economy.
Well, it becomes economic blackmail.
Yes.
China will be able to use economic blackmail to force the United States to comply. Otherwise, the economy could very easily implode. Because China has been really funding the United States
Yes.
debt up until recently. So this should be a paramount concern. There's no easy fix for it. There really isn't. I mean, right now we have to borrow $300 billion just to keep our economy going. So we have to print more money, to keep this bubble from popping. But at some point, and this is a major step toward the bubble popping, is this petro-yuan is it's going to be probably one of the biggest stories in the near future.
Yes. But it's one of those things that sort of grows and grows and grows. I mean,
I'm sure they're working out the bugs right now.
Yeah.
Because there's, it's a major shift in the financial markets, so they have to approach it slowly. It's not something they probably even want to come in fast and furious. They probably want to start it very slowly and let it organically grow.
Well, okay, let's face it though, China's not a free market. So I'm sure that even the 40,000 contracts that were traded on Monday, I'll bet the large majority of those were prearranged by the government, i.e. the Communist Party in China. Says, hey, we got this thing coming up.
Must get on board.
You want to get on board, right?
Right.
Oh, no? Oh, okay. How many kidneys did you say you have? You got 2? You don't need 2. Oh, you are on board. Okay. I thought I misunderstood you then the first time. This is I know how it works in South Korea, and China is even more so. I mean, this is a dictatorial system. It's under the dictatorship of the Communist Party. But it will grow because they have an opportunity to make it grow because they do have this leverage of being the largest consumer of oil in the world, the largest importer of oil in the world.
And they're also becoming the largest manufacturing base in the world. So I think most countries are going to want to do business in both. Just like a top business person will want to contribute to both parties,
right.
Because whoever gets in there, they want to be looked at in a favorable light. I think it's the same in world politics, that a lot of countries in Africa, South America, and even Europe will want to be looked favorably upon China.
Well, Russia, relations with the U.S. are not going so well. I'm sure they'll be happy to get out of the petrodollar system, and it'll be a way for Russia to circumvent sanctions that are being put on them, which they see as being unfair, or they would like to get out of that. Of course, North Korea but even a place like Venezuela, for example. Venezuela is actually an exporter of oil to China. So they will accept gold.
Well, that's a good point. A lot of our political influence will diminish as this grows.
Yes.
We won't be able to, force other countries to do what we want them to do as easily.
And aside from the economic aspect, that would be another major effect from this. India also probably is willing to go along with this, although India and China, of course, are kind of, cat and dog. They don't really get along with each other at all. But India still, I think, will be willing to, maybe they'll be one of the ones that sort of invest in both. Western Europe will probably stick with the dollar more than other countries, but many African countries African countries are in hock to China because of the Belt and Road capital programs, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of you know, they owe a lot of money to China, so they'll be forced into participating in this system,
Right.
very easily forced into them,
Mm-hmm.
and South American countries as well, perhaps. Yeah. So yeah, this is the beginning of something big, and we'll have to see how it grows over the next. It'll take, I don't know, the closing of the gold window took some time before its effects really became obvious. Some years, but now that things are happening more rapidly, probably won't take that much amount of time. Maybe
a couple of years.
couple years,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, couple years, maybe
Before we
less.
maybe even less, because we are in this hyper bubble.
Yes,
So if the economy does, even this year, the economy could take a major hit.
mm-hmm.
People will go to where it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's hard to predict.
Hard to
So
predict.
many things, so many balls in the air.
Yes. So many house of cards. Which card is going to go?
Right.
Which card is going to go? Okay, yeah, I wanted very definitely to cover that this morning. Now, 1/5 of Americans want to repeal the Second Amendment, Breitbart.com article, after former Justice John Paul Stevens called for a repeal of the Second Amendment. The Washington Post indicated that the latest poll on the subject shows 1/5 of Americans support the idea of a repeal. Stevens' call to repeal the Second Amendment came 2 days after actor and comedian Michael Ian Black called for the repeal. Black tweeted, "I'll say it, assault weapons aren't the problem. Handguns are the problem. By all means, ban AR-15s and the like." That's one of these. But handguns kill far more people. Don't knives kill far more people as well?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's
Gotta
ban the
'em.
knives, yeah.
Gotta ban them.
We can all, like in the airplanes, they only give you plastic knives.
Right.
Yeah. So we could all use the plastic knives, Ban the metal knife. Yeah? Let's put that tweet
What
out.
about scissors?
Scissors.
You ban knives, scissor murders are going to go up.
Hey, well, yeah, scissor murders go way up. Yeah. Then but they have those scissors that they use in kindergarten, don't they? In nursery school,
The rounded ones.
the rounded
Yeah,
ones.
yeah.
Yeah. So pretty soon we'll all be eating soft food, baby food. The solution is to repeal and replace the Second Amendment, make gun ownership a privilege, not a right. But you see, it's a right not because someone made it a right. All right, Mr. Black, it's a right because God made it a right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a problem with it, take your case to God, for crying out loud. Don't complain to us. The WAPO reports the results of a February Economist YouGov poll that showed 21% of Americans supported repealing the Second Amendment. I wonder how different that is from the past. I have a feeling that there's always been a certain, it's never been 100% of Americans are in favor of anything. I'm sure there has always been a certain part of American population that didn't really like the Second Amendment.
Well, I would say in the last 100 years that's so, but I would say before the advent of cities, I would say most rural people say, "You don't touch my gun."
Yeah.
Because you have to remember, 98% of Americans used to be farmers,
Yes.
and every farmer had guns
Yes.
For more than one reason. So I would say it is kind of recent, and I would say in the last 50 to 100 years, where there's a growing segment of the population that doesn't understand the Second Amendment. And I would say what's alarming is through Common Core and through the public school system, that I would say if you were to ask somebody 16 years and younger what they think about the Second Amendment and should it be repealed, it might be alarming. I'd like to see that poll. I would venture to say maybe 50% of young people would think, yes, let's repeal it. It would make us safer. Don't you think? The way the public schools are teaching young people these days, it's alarming. And the turnout was shocking, I think, for March for Our Lives. Most young people are being duped into this thinking that guns are the problem.
But the process for approving the repeal of the Second Amendment requires 3/4 of the states or 3/4 of state legislatures to vote in favor of repealing it, and that only happens after 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate propose the repeal. So changing the U.S. Constitution is not an easy thing to do, although the Supreme Court has been able to find things in the Constitution that no one actually knew were there for the past 200 years, such as the right for abortion. So that's that's another danger that is possible, that the Supreme Court may someday decide, hey, you know what, the Second Amendment means exactly the opposite of what we always thought it meant. They can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like we saw that in the recent redistricting of the congressional districts in Pennsylvania, where the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did something that was clearly against the Pennsylvania Constitution, but they got away with it because in the U.S. Supreme Court actually let them get away with it. The Constitution clearly says that it's the legislatures that are supposed to draw these congressional district lines, but the Supreme Court just unilaterally drew their own map and imposed that. So this is the thing. What do you do when the Supreme Court goes against the Constitution?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. What do you do?
Choniguk has the answer. The king. In Choniguk, the king is another place to which you can appeal and say, hey, the Supreme Court is doing something here that is against the Constitution, clearly against it. And then it becomes the responsibility of the king then to protect the rights of the people by saying, hey, no, the Supreme Court is wrong, striking down that Supreme Court decision. And that's another reason why we need the Choniguk Constitution to come into effect as quickly as possible. Because in this kind of a case, if the Supreme Court were to decide that the Second Amendment is unconstitutional, that would work very well.
Outdated, no longer relevant.
Right, yeah. The Second Amendment only means that you can have the same kinds of weapons that they were using at the end of the 18th century.
Right.
That, it does not cover anything that was invented past 1800. If the Supreme Court were to decide something like that, what would you do?
Somebody described it, the Second Amendment is not only an individual right, but it's a collective right that protects and honors the other 26 amendments. Without the Second Amendment, there's no way to really protect the other 26 amendments.
Yes.
I think that's a good point. It's a collective right we have as American citizens. And I think we need to have a robust debate and discussion about militias, because I think it's militias that really give teeth to the Second Amendment.
Yes.
Because when you're dealing with just individuals with the rights to own, right to bear arms, that's one thing. But when you have a collective militia with the right to bear arms, then that's something government fears. And the whole point of the Second Amendment was to have government fear its people.
Yes.
People forget that.
Not
they think, oh, it's just your Second Amendment is really just so you can go out and shoot gophers on your farm if they're a problem. No, it's really to protect people from a tyrannical government.
Yes, and it is what gives the people sovereignty.
Yeah.
People talk about how in a democracy it's the people that have sovereignty, but no, if you don't have a way of overthrowing the government, you really don't have sovereignty.
Right. And that's an unpleasant thought, because we all like to believe in our government. We all like to think that, our United States government has my best interest in mind. But in reality, government is made up of politicians, and politicians are human beings with fallen nature and tend to be psychopathic in nature. I
remember Michelle Obama one time said, you don't have to worry about the government because the government is us. We are the government. Well, maybe you are the government. Maybe so, yeah. But it's not the people right now. Yeah. So it is important.
And even Marx said democracies lead to socialism, and socialism leads to communism. So that's something that democracies are dangerous by nature, and we are a republic. We are not a democracy.
And Kukjin pointed this out in his lectures in Korea, the Strong Korea lectures, that he gave the example of the Roman Republic, which led to the through welfare, through giving of free stuff, led to the Roman Empire, and then eventually to Roman Empire into a dictatorship, and then eventually to its own downfall. Democracies only last about 250 years, which is about where we are right now.
We're on track.
So I just said we're a republic and not a democracy, but we have becoming a democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is not a good thing, because Father described democracy as a kind of a brother or sibling situation, where in the absence of parents, siblings are fighting each other. And he said that the parents have to come around. And that's why he said, in God's ideal world, there will not be democracy or communism, but there will be a parentism, true parentism, or Chonbujo, heavenly fatherism. And this is actually what is reflected in the Cheongguk Constitution that was announced by the second king in 2015. You have a king.
Your king and
You have
queen.
a king. You have a king and queen, but especially a king. You can't have a king without a queen. But anyway, you have a king, and it's the duty, the role of the king to protect the rights of the minority, and it's the role of the king to make us all kings,
Yes.
and to give us all the right to wear crowns and to have the rod of iron, to give us all sovereignty. And this is the role of the king in Cheongguk.
And to protect that sovereignty.
Yes, and this is what's so wonderful about that Constitution. And I hope people will take a look at it again, because the more you read it, the more you study it, the more you realize that this truly is a revelation from God, and it is the culmination of the of Father's teaching and of the divine principle. It's the fruit of that. It's the fruit of that. And Father said that his heir would announce the Cheongguk Constitution, but I think Father announced it through the second king.
Well, this is a good story that illustrates the threat of democracy. This Second Amendment, the repealing of the Second Amendment, is a classic example of mob rule.
Yes.
And what happens when democracy rules the day versus the republic. The republic clearly states the Second Amendment shall not be, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
And that is a God-given right.
Yes.
And it's not something to be meddled with.
Speaking of mob rule, David Hogg has a complaint. He says, "I'm changing the world, but University of California schools still rejected me." Let's see how much trouble he's in. Tuesday, during an interview with TMZ's Harvey Levin, gun control proponent and Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg said it was annoying that he has been rejected by all the University of California campuses that he'd submitted college admissions applications for, but he will continue to change the world. TMZ reported Hogg submitted applications to UCLA, UCSD, UCSB, and UC Irvine.
And he was rejected by all of those?
He was rejected
Wow.
by all of those. Hogg said, "It's not been too great for me and some of the other members in the movement, like Ryan Deitch. We got rejected from UCLA. I got rejected from UCLA and UCSD. So it's been kind of annoying having to deal with that and everything else that's been going on. But at this point, it's, we're changing the world. We're too busy right now. It's too hard to focus on that."
How much you want to bet he gets a letter from UCLA announcing his acceptance?
He continued, "I think there's a lot of amazing people who don't get into college, not only that do things like I do, but because their voices just aren't heard in the tsunami that apply every year to college in such an impacted school system here that we have in America, where people have to go into massive amounts of debt just to go to college and get an education. I think it's really sad, but it's the truth." He added, it is absolutely disappointing, but at this point, we're already changing the world. If colleges want to support us in that, great. If they don't, it doesn't matter. We're still going to change the world." This guy.
He's kind of full of himself.
He is kind of full of himself. Actually, some of the comments here. One comment here says, just as John Lakeside 17 hours ago, "Kid has an ego that is light years ahead of his accomplishments." "Son, your claim to fame is that 17 members of your school community were killed by an uncontrolled mentally ill person, and that a media cabal stuck a microphone in front of your face and allowed you to run. You were putty in their hands, but now the focus is back on the failures of mental health treatment, and so your fame is fleeting," this person said.
Municipal idiot.
Yes. So
I listened to
poor,
one interview.
poor David Hogg.
I listened to one interview, and he was just delighted that all this attention was coming his way. He said he was basically saying this is going to make his path to stardom really great. So he's really in this for himself.
Yes, I think he's got 15 minutes of fame, and I think he's on about the 13th minute of that right now. Yeah, Michael Moore is chiming in. He says voting age should be lowered to 16. There we go.
Does anybody listen to him? He gets a lot of headline news, but I'm wondering who listens to him.
Well, this is the future David Hogg, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. This is David Hogg in the future. The tech team isn't showing it right now, but this photograph of Michael Moore, documentary filmmaker and left-wing activist Michael Moore.
Looking more like Jabba the Hutt.
Michael Moore had a revelation about the legal age to vote in America after Nicholas Cruz killed 17 people with a legally purchased AR-15 rifle at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Michael Moore took to Twitter on Monday and shared the one thing he says we've learned since last month's horrific mass shooting. If there's one thing we've learned since Parkland, it's that the voting age should be lowered to 16. Other countries do it. We should too. I'm not aware of any country that lowers the voting age to 16. But anyway, I guess he knows of a couple of countries that way. But, you know, if you lower the voting age to 16, if you're going to consider 16-year-olds old enough to vote, or even 18-year-olds old enough to vote, responsible enough to vote, old enough to go to the military, how come they're not old enough to own an AR-15?
Right. The minimum age is 16 in Argentina, Austria, Brazil, Cuba, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Island of Man.
That's in the English Channel, yeah.
Is it? Okay.
The Isle of Man.
Okay. Isle of Man, okay. Anyway, so there are a few countries.
Okay. All right. And I'm sure they're getting along fine. Yes. But, yeah. But if we're going to say that you're an adult at a certain age, then you should have all the adult privileges. I'm even against, here in Pennsylvania, kids have to wait until they're 21 to get a concealed carry permit. That's discrimination.
Yeah, we should not send them into the military until they're 21 if that's the case.
If that's the case, yes.
But that's clearly not the case.
Yeah.
Many 18-year-olds go into the military.
Yes, yes.
And they deal with assault weapons.
They don't. Well, they're not assault weapons, right? They're defense weapons.
Defense weapons. Weapons of peace.
Weapons of peace, yes. Oh, boy. So Michael Moore is chiming in on that. And, yeah, there is a huge assault. There is an assault on the Second Amendment and the right now.
It's the rod of iron, Tim.
Yes.
It's the assault on the rod of iron. It is the defining line. It's the line in the sand as the king brought forth the revelation that Christ will rule with the rod of iron. And all of a sudden, right after that ceremony, we see a nationwide attack on the AR-15. Amazing parallel, the micro and the macro. Yeah, it's really happening so quickly right now. And then China also is challenging the U.S. So a lot of things are happening right now. It's been interesting dealing with the Argentina news.
The news crew
that was here the last few days.
Are they still here? They left now,
No,
right?
they left, yeah. And Washington Post is coming today, Washington Post magazine.
To interview the king.
Interview the king and also Cookchenham tomorrow. But they were saying that how defenseless they feel as citizens of Argentina because they do not have the right to bear arms. And so criminals just run the day down there. Politicians who are all armed are in total control, and the criminals are in total control because they have weapons. So they were actually doing a piece, from my understanding, and again, it could be fake news, that they were here to really show the other side that the importance of a constitutional right to bear arms, and that they would like to bring this debate to Argentina because they and many countries feel this way, that the citizens feel helpless in the line of fire of criminals, whether they be political criminals or thugs on the street. They are literally sitting ducks. And this one gentleman was saying that when your house is robbed, then it sends out a notice to all the other criminals that this is an easy target. This is a soft target. So the house keeps getting robbed over and over again. So it's really a shame that people have to do not have the ability to protect themselves. It really is a God-given right to be able to protect yourself and your family. And that's why it's part of the Chungoga Constitution, a God-given right to protect oneself and one's loved ones.
Yeah, it is definitely a right, not a privilege, and it's not a right that someone can take away.
Yeah.
It's inalienable.
Right.
And I hope that people look up the word inalienable. It means that, I cannot give it away. No one can take it away. Inalienable means it is a right that I have it, even if the government says I don't have it, I have it. Even if someone says they take it away from me, I still have it. Even if I want to give it away, I still have it. It's there. It's part of me because this is something that God gave me. It's an inalienable right. It's a natural right. And this is what the left needs to understand. They don't have the ability to take it away. Not only the right to take it away, but they don't have the ability to take it away. And they say, oh, look at Europe. Oh, look at Japan. Well, those governments, and Japan is an interesting case because Japan always had a certain class that was allowed to carry weapons, the samurai class. And basically what happened in the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century was that the ability to carry weapons was transferred from one class to another. At that time, the mid-19th century, 1868 and onward, the Meiji government told all the samurai to give up their swords. But then they gave weapons to their soldiers. They formed an army and also police, and then they gave them weapons. So then there was another class. So today also there's a class in Japan that is allowed to have weapons, and then the rest of the people are not allowed to have weapons. That's the way it works. But that's not a healthy society. That's not a free society. We experienced in our own community of faith that where people would be kidnapped, all right, for the deprogrammers would kidnap our people, they would escape, they would run into a police station, and the police would deliver them back to their kidnappers. That was experienced by several people, members in Japan. So that just shows you that in Japan you have whatever rights the police decide to give you. Human rights are determined by the police. They decide who has human rights and who doesn't. And our members that did not have human rights. And that they can do that because they are the class that is allowed to have weapons. So you cannot say that Japan is a free society in that sense. Japanese people say, yes, but we're peaceful. Yes, well, Japan was peaceful for about 250 years under the Edo shogunate. Do you want to go back to that? Japan was peaceful then too. But that's not the kind of society that modern people want to live in. That's not the kind of society that God created us to live in. So Japan is not a model. And UK, despite Piers Morgan and what's that other guy's name? I keep forgetting his name. On CNN, keeps saying, is also not a model. Most surveilled society in the world. Perhaps even more than I'm sure more than North Korea. I mean, I'm pretty sure North Korea does not have as many cameras,
the technology
and cameras on the streets as UK does.
Yeah.
So that's not the kind of society where we want to live either. Australia, but actually Australia, I've seen that gun ownership in Australia now is up to about where it was prior to the confiscation. So Australians are taking back their guns. Good for them. So really, we have to look elsewhere for the cause of the mass shootings in America. One cause might be the 1990 law that created these gun-free zones around schools. Yeah, that law's not working out so well.
No.
Let's look at that law. 1,000 feet from a school zone, you're not allowed to knowingly own. If you're knowingly within 1,000 feet of a school zone, you're not allowed to have a weapon, a gun, or anything like that. So those kinds of things that we really need to look at. But the left has a political agenda that they want to concentrate power in the government and guns in the hands of people, it goes against that. And so that is why they are so forcefully working against this and using tragedies, using the deaths of those 17 people for their political purpose, and using these young kids for their political purpose, manipulating them. It's really terrible to see what's going on. But this is democracy moving towards dictatorship. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
And they're also they're in the process of shutting down free speech, which is a violation of our First Amendment. Mm-hmm. So you have the combination of you have a political agenda that is being pushed, and the shutting down of the free exercise of debate over topics like this. And that's why what's happening around college campuses right now and in social media, the clamping down of ideas is really something all Americans should be alarmed by, because this is the beginning of the end. Once free speech is gone, once the Second Amendment is gone, then we are open to tyrannical rule.
Yes. But let's resist.
Yes.
We are the resistance.
Yes.
We are the resistance.
This is the time to become politically active,
yes,
for sure.
Yes,
I think
it
that's
is.
the message the King is giving all of us, is it's no longer the religious path just to sit and pray. We need to get politically involved. We need to get, especially in local elections, who is in the political sphere supporting the Second Amendment and who is promoting free speech.
Yes.
I think those are the First and Second Amendment. Those are the key issues right now, and we need to get off our butt and get politically involved.
We do. Yes, before
With
they
the
lower the age to 16.
That's right.
I don't think that's going to happen anyway. But that's be vigilant today, Wednesday, March 28th, 2018, and things are going to be more and more difficult. The judgment is continuing, and it's going to get really, really tough. But let's stay vigilant and support God's work. And after all, in the end, God is in charge. And even though Xi Jinping thinks that he can take over the world, God is in charge. If there were no God, he would be in a good position. But if there is a God, then that would be a very inconvenient truth for him. Yes. All right, let's end the broadcast now. It's time to end. I wish we could continue more, but we have to go out and fight, don't we?
Yes.
We can't just be sitting here. We have to go out and fight. All right. Thank you for joining us this morning. Godspeed. God bless. Godspeed. And may his kingdom come. It will come.
Adieu.